Thanks, David, and thanks again to Auntie Anne for her warm welcome to country. We are on Gadigal land, and can I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. And welcome to the Foresighting Forum. I think we're missing a few people from Melbourne, or have the Melbourne planes arrived? Not yet. Well, we've got a few more coming, so that'll be good when they get here, but we need to get going. This is our fourth Foresighting Forum, which seems incredible to me that we've had this for 4 years. There are a few stalwarts here, I think, who've been just about at every forum. How many people have been here for 3 or 4 forums? Raise your hands for me. Quite a lot. So we've got some real stalwarts in the room. That's great. Our vision for this forum, right from the start, was to create a place where everybody could come together, people from the private sector, consumer advocates, community people, environmental advocates, government officials, the regulators, all of us, to engage in a conversation about the big complex issues in energy and to engage in strategic responses. So we wanted to give ourselves, at Energy Consumers Australia and everybody else who was interested, really an opportunity to lay down the day-to-day tools and to look forward into those complex problems, and to do that in a way together so that we could really start to address some of those big complex issues and see what we could do about creating the future. So it's an optimistic mindset that we bring to this forum, one that looks to be problem solving. And the participants, including all these stalwarts here today, are the people who've made this format really work. A lot of the people who raised their hands, as I was looking around, are consumer advocates, long-standing consumer advocates. They know what it means in real practical terms to look at strategy in the future. A lot of them are chairing panels over the next 2 days, and they're not only there because of their expertise and contributions, but also to make sure, given we're such a mixed group, that our focus is clear, which is on residential households and small businesses, and to make sure we're asking the right questions about those things. So what does it mean for affordability? What does it mean for everybody, not just some? How do we make this market easier for people? How does it help households and small businesses to manage energy in this market? And is what we're going to do when we think about these strategies, is this going to build trust and confidence in the energy sector? Before I move off the subject of stalwarts generally, I want to recognize a couple of people. I want to, in particular, thank our stalwart networking sponsors who've been with us for some time doing this. Is Rob Gregory here from Maddox? Not yet, not arrived. He'll be here this evening, so we'll get a chance to meet him. And Ted, is Ted here yet? Ted Surratt? I think he's coming in from Melbourne, from KPMG, so he might not arrived yet. That's fine. Maddox and KPMG are foundation partners of Energy Consumers Australia. They've been a consistent and essential presence at this Foresighting Forum, and the networking drinks which they sponsor have become an important event, particularly because we come from all the different sectors in this energy market. We're all energy market stakeholders from various places. I also want to make a special mention to our retiring board members. That's Steve Graham, Claire Petrie, and Catherine Cooper. Steve, Claire, and Kathy were instrumental in the creation of this organization, an institution whose mission is to get better outcomes for households and small businesses, and I think contributed to the quite unusual organizational architecture, which I think is not replicated anywhere in Australia or internationally at the moment. There's no precedence. I want to record my very deep thanks to them, to all 3 of them, for their commitments, their exceptional service to Energy Consumers Australia. And I do that on behalf of the board, current board members, and the team at ECA. And lucky for us, Virginia Hickey, Virginia, you might put up your hand, who is a governance expert and a teacher of many of the company director graduates in this country. She's reappointed and can continue her stalwartship, if that's a word. And I'm going to introduce new colleagues to you as well, soon to be stalwarts. The three newly appointed Energy Consumers Australia board members, and two of whom are here today, are Gavin Dufty, who you've met it, Gavin, good. I hardly need to introduce Gavin. He's one of Australia's most respected, experienced and influential advocates for energy consumers. And Chris Spanghero. Where's Chris? Oh, there he is, Chris, who brings to our board a very deep understanding of regulation and public policy in energy, water, and other key parts of the economy. One member couldn't be here, Dr. Helen Garnett, who's certainly no stranger to big, complex issues like the ones we're addressing. She's the former head of the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation, and unfortunately couldn't rearrange her schedule at short notice to get to our forum for the next couple of days. So can I formally welcome you, and I can't think of a better place to immerse yourself in the responsibilities of being a board member of ECA than this particular event. Our focus this year is data. Data is one of the defining issues of our time, not just in energy. Our theme is take charge, data powering better outcomes for consumers. And what do we mean by that? Data is one of those topics that lends itself to a lot of hyperbole. You might have noticed in the Economist article on the subject that they described it as the new oil in relation to economic importance. The BBC one went step further. They said that they would place it in the same class as sunlight. I'm not quite sure I would do that, but our theme actually intentionally marries the two major things that have the potential not just to reshape the energy system, but a whole lot of our economy and probably our society. So the take charge concept, and this was the theme last year as well, but in relation to energy use, it goes to the heart of what is not just an ambition we have for consumers, but is increasingly being understood, I think, as a basic expectation for consumers in all markets. So when we're thinking about taking charge, we're not just thinking about the 2 million Australian consumers that now have solar panels on their roofs and are breaking the centralized model that we've had of energy. And we're not just thinking of those other people in the economy who are leveraging the platforms and the devices in the taxi industry, in the hotel industries, and many other industries, but also about, I think, a deeper reset for what consumers want from markets, including the energy markets, how markets are supposed to work for them, and critically for each other. So I think this has been really clear as we've been watching the Hayne Royal Commission into the financial sector and watched the spotlight being shone on all of that bad behavior by banks, insurance companies, and others. But the Commission also allowed people to express what good service really should look like and what it meant to them. So we saw people very clearly refusing to tolerate these confusing marketing practices that are being used on them, refusing to accept businesses not taking reasonable steps to understand their situation and their circumstances and to provide the products that meets their circumstances, and refusing to just take it on trust that the business really knows best for them. So this is being wrapped up, I think, in that evolving public debate on trust and the need to restore it. We've seen an awful lot of column inches on trust, the need for restore it. The AFR is about to have a major conference on this. But you'll notice in all of this that there's not a lot of remedies, not a lot of real information about how to do this, or real thinking, I think, about some of the structural implications, what it means for competition if we think this way, particularly in relation to something like energy, where people cannot choose not to consume the product. And it's also delivered by a very networked, highly interdependent system that needs to be reconfigured. And what does that mean in terms of truly serving consumers and having them at the center of the system? Paul Kelly in The Australian, I think back in November, came, as he was commenting on the Royal Commission, probably came closest to describing in general what we mean. He talked about the public wanting to be enabled through a more participatory form of service delivery. What he didn't spell out was any detail for what this looks like in any positive sense, and focused instead, as Paul would do, on what governments should not do in this space. At last year's Foresighting Forum, Rosemary Sinclair, the ECA CEO, introduced our affordable, individualized, optimized vision for energy services, which in our view, and importantly for these 2 days in particular, it points to data driving better policy, planning, operational and business decisions, and data underpinning a fundamentally different individualized experience for consumers. So that brings in the second element, data, powering better outcomes. We're catching glimpses of this, I think, in the new word of tailored individualized information, tools and services that have been emerging. Examples include the Reduce Your Juice and the Power Shift project, the bill scanning technology of Service New South Wales, which it has rolled out for its comparison service, making potentially changing your service provider very easy. But mainly perhaps, or most clearly perhaps, through the apps that are enabling consumers at times when the system is under stress, under usually serious heat, extreme conditions, to partner with retailers and the networks to reduce their consumption and maintain the security of the system. So in these developments are the seeds, only the seeds, I think, of what looks like the end of the one-size-fits-all energy market. But in many ways, these innovations really are simply postcards at this point, postcards from the future. They're far from being a representative experience for most households and most business energy consumers. And that might be a bit surprising, I think. Data isn't new news to anybody here. There were recommendations in the Finkel report. There were recommendations from Rod Sims and the ACCC. Before that, the AMC's work on power of choice, and probably every other major review over the last 20 years has mentioned data. So it's hardly new. It's why smart meters were rolled out in Victoria. It's why people are following suit in the other jurisdictions. But in what has the hallmarks of a true crime podcast series, and for reasons very mysterious, we haven't yet managed to translate significant investment in data into cheaper bills for consumers, more comfortable homes, more competitive businesses, or improved levels of trust and confidence. So this is where Peter Harris at the Productivity Commission, in their report onto their inquiry and report into data use and availability, that report, which formed the basis of the Consumer Data Right, or the CDR, they started to move on solving this mystery. That report, by the way, is, in my view, of the standing of the Hilmer Report and National Competition Policy. I think we'll see in 10, 20 years just how significant this particular report was to Australians and the Australian economy. Now, I don't want to reveal too much. We've got a session coming up chaired by Alan Kirkland in his panel this morning to explain why the Productivity Commission took a quite unprecedented step, in my experience of their work, of recommending a new right to unlock the benefits of data in energy and banking and other sectors of the economy. But a quote from the Productivity Commission report gives us a sense of the possibilities they were thinking about, and I quote, "The substantive argument for making data more available is that opportunities to use it are largely unknown until the data sources themselves are better known, and until data users have been able to undertake the discovery of data and the work that allows the data to speak to us." This deeply positive framing is a very good starting point for our 2 days together, where we will be coming at the data issue from a range of different angles, covered by the matrix that David Haviett and the Program Development Committee created for this Foresighting Forum, and you have on your tables there the indication of that matrix. There are 4 lenses that we're going to be using: behavioral, regulatory, technical, and digital, and 3 domains, and across 3 domains, individuals, organizations, and the system. So by filling in the boxes in that matrix, we are necessarily going to be saying something quite new and important about what the future energy market can and should look like for Australian households and small business. In our assessment at ECA, it's becoming increasingly important, we think, for consumers to be much more explicit about their preferred future both in policy processes, in investment decisions that are being made right now, and that have the potential to really lock in future pathways and close some other pathways. So in this time of significant transition, we think it's becoming pretty important to do everything we can to preserve and not close down some of those futures by current investment. And that's why the forum in 2020, Foresighting Forum in 2020, is going to be about long-term consumer visions for the market. And our Director of Advocacy and Communications, Chris Alexander, whom I saw around here somewhere a moment ago, there he is at the back there, is going to be leading the project over the year, culminating in the forum in 2020. But it's now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, our international keynote, Michael Murray, who is president of the US-based tech coalition Mission: Data. I love the name of the organization, and it's quite clear what they do as a result. I hope Michael's enjoying our weather here. I had a look at the temperature in Seattle, and even if we've got rain for you, it's a little bit better than your temperature of around 2 degrees, I think, today. So we try to keep abreast of international developments, all of us in the community consumer world in Australia. That informs us and helps us to deliver better outcomes for Australian consumers. But we found through our international contacts that, in fact, often we are at the forefront of the transition to a more decentralized, we're the experiment, we're the pioneers. But that isn't the case in data. And particularly in terms of aspirations around data, the United States leads the way, particularly in energy with the Green Button Initiative. The Green Button originated in the White House Office of Science and Technology under the Obama administration in 2012, and it's an idea and a challenge to the whole sector. It's developed in no small part due to Michael into a transformative force in the energy sector, and it's being taken up by utilities, and it's reshaping the regulatory landscape. I'm sure Michael will tell us it wasn't a smooth process, and the victory line may be still quite a ways in the future, but I'm very much looking forward to hearing Michael's story about data and innovation in the United States. So please welcome Michael Murray, the president of Mission Data.